the mainstream even is starting to pay attention, because I think they know that there's a stronger than likely chance that in the time period in the cycle we're in right now, that we're going to have a major solar event, even within our lifetime as a bunch of, older middle-aged people. If you have real records of long past human eras, and you have the most brilliant minds working, I'm going to assume that, because why wouldn't you if you had the world's resources at your fingertips? You would have the smartest people that aren't really known working, or even the ones that are known, working behind the scenes to give you an accurate depiction of the cycles, how they overlap, what happens afterwards, beforehand, and then you would do your betting, like put options.
Thank you for everyone joining us tonight. It seems like the world of natural is starting to bend and morph to the noticeability of most of the planet. Now, if you were looking for signs or looking for the media to push fear, you would look at all of these events and line them up and see them one after another. I did want to talk about the coronal hole stream tonight, the way the media is pushing this 60 Earth-size coronal hole stream, but you can fit 1.2 million Earths in the sun. So in retrospect, it's just a headline grabber. Millions of fish washing up in northern Japan. We got the locusts descending across Mexico, just nibbling at crops. People are watching the skies darken. Record-breaking snowfalls in Moscow, biggest in 150 years. Record cold temperatures in Russia, 68 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit already this early in the year. And it just continues. So as we move into what is now going to be a currency reset / all these natural events / people feeling differently, the sun's for sure changing its frequency. How do we survive through these times? Is more the question of what we wanted to talk about tonight. I mean, we could go through, and I will go through, a bevy of stories from these record incredible floods across Africa. Some things that are turning areas into inland seas. Well, that would be expected because the African mega lakes used to be full of water and they were larger than our Great Lakes. But as they diminished and evaporated, people would put villages closer and closer to the shorelines until we reached the minimums that we experienced in the 1980s. And now suddenly, the lakes are filling back up and flooding all the villages at the bottom of the lake. It's also, for all of you who signed up for the show notes, thank you. If you want to go to the show notes and get our recap, you can go to oilseedcrops.org /MIAC show notes. It's up there in the browser tab. Click on that, put your email in. We'll get you a composite of the top 10 things we talked about this evening, so you can wind those up and start conversations and also do some of your own research. So, Ransom, I'm glad you're with me because it does seem like there's a lot of natural things happening, and this coronal hole stream, when it moved around, boom, we had all these big earthquakes of 7.9 in the Philippines and subsequent 6 point, almost 7.0 earthquakes. I mean, how many? There was a dozen, over 6 earthquakes that same day that this thing lined up directly with the Earth. So we can see the sun directly affects our planet. So what they talk about with global warming and no effects of the sun on our Earth, on jet streams or cloud cells. And it was so interesting because during COP28, as the coronal hole stream came in and rocked the planet with those earthquakes, the same day as COP28 was taking place, they're still saying that the sun has no effect on our planet at all. Yeah, we got rocked with an enormous amount of quakes the same day the coronal hole stream faced our planet. But, now it's obvious for those that are looking that, wait a second, something's not adding up. So, Ransom, I appreciate you joining me. Shake and bake on the planet. Here we go. Gold has soared past $2,000 an ounce. All-time record high prices. Wars in Israel and Ukraine. Rate cuts on the table, fueling gold's meteoric rise. Call the proud America to the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention the Adapt 2030 channel. You're going to get some great in-class service. Also, Patriot Gold Group has a no fee for life IRA where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver.
No fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video.
Did you see that CME that just went off the backside of the sun today? Man, it was massive. That would have really crippled the Earth there, it looked like. You know, when it spun around. That big hole on my birthday, yeah, that was a giant, it was quite big, even in comparison to the total size of the sun. I mean, it was like, a tenth or something like that. I mean, it was like 1/3 of our view. I thought it was ironic. I shared it. There's all kinds of memes out, portraying that hole as some kind of shape. One of them was a duck. One of them was the "Don't Tread on Me" snake, because it had that weird shape that they put out in the media there. There was a bunch of people preaching to the choir for some years, and now the mainstream media seems to be jumping on board, trying to hijack every topic that's, people have been kind of warning people about. The sun burping out some kind of CME that directly hits Earth when it's facing Earth, in my opinion, been really sorely underplayed by not only governments, by media. There's been a few movies. There's that one with, what's his name in it that's in every movie? I forgot his name. Nicholas Cage.
That one dude who's always there. Yeah,
numbers.
That's that one dude who you always know. It was called Noting. Noting.
Yeah, that's right. That was actually, kind of a weird idea there, at least the part where people were receiving messages, so to speak, directly every time there was a solar flare event or something like that. People on Earth had ideas. And, that's kind of like what people talk about when they just get a download looking out in the universe. If you did that from some random star in the night sky, why wouldn't you get it from our nearest star, the sun? You know what I'm saying? I mean, how many ideas are broadcast? It's kind of an idea that the ancient Egyptians, especially Akhenaten, had. If you wanted to manifest something, you literally had to stargaze or look right into the sun. And the whole era there was when they moved over to a monotheistic idea. So he was like a big revolutionary at the time, telling people there was only one God per se, and then that manifested kind of the last 2,000 years on Earth. So what a cycle to be in, where the mainstream even is starting to pay attention, because I think they know that there's a stronger than likely chance that in the time period in the cycle we're in right now, that we're going to have a major solar event, even within our lifetime as a bunch of, older middle-aged people. I don't think it'll just be like Gen Z that sees it. I hope not, because they are lost. The older people than them that would be around would be the millennials, Wow, what a future to think about. It's, in my opinion, been underplayed. And any bit of research into the infrastructure of the U.S. and other countries when it comes to how much or how not at all they prepared for an event from the sun to happen, you would realize that I think that what you call infrastructure to the elite, to the people that are controlling things, is a temporary setup. Like when you pitch a tent at a base camp before you actually build the house and build the real infrastructure. That's how they view the electric grid and the infrastructure that's currently around the world. And I think one of the major points of this reset is after they reduce the amount of people, they are going to promise the next generation some of the most extravagant human projects to build things. And I think this kind of falls into that line, because they're going to have to promise to the leftover people of the world, if this event happened, why they didn't do anything to prepare for it. And I think the answer to that is they did prepare for it, just not in the way that benefits the human beings living on the planet right now. They set it up to benefit, a small, segregated, hand-picked class of people that will be picked. We got dumbs all over the place. They have redundancy, continuity of government programs, I'm sure, that no one will ever even know about. And then there's some public ones that you can look into. And when you look into the public side of things, you realize it's really seemingly set up to fail. They did not do any redundancies really to back up the infrastructure as far as we have it now, like where there's a bunch of power lines, substations, transformers, etc. All that stuff's going to be toast and it'll be out. And I think it's really bizarre that a few years ago, I don't know much about it. Maybe I should research it more, but I know this much, that a group of armed men seemingly was practicing doing something that they had a lot of knowledge about. And the reason I say that is the places that they actually struck with gunfire crippled the power station there. So it was like a practice run or a dry run. And, I think there are some really nefarious plans out there as far as North America, South America, Europe, to bring them into a more destabilizing phase in their existence. And when you look down in South America right now and you look at Maduro, openly saying that he's going to invade the next country over, and everybody else is saying, whatever. I mean, who cares about that country? I mean, most people don't even know it exists right there on the map. It's Guyana, or I'm not sure how you pronounce it, right? How they pronounce it. But just think about that. There's, tin pot type dictators right now that we saw it coming. That was going to happen, obviously, to Venezuela, the way that it went down and turned socialism and then turned into a hellhole. And now they're already trying to expand out to get resources that they've swindled with their obviously meant to fail government system there. And then it's weird that the people of Venezuela even put up with it. That guy's not, I think he's like actually a Colombian, like he's not even from their country. That's going to start things going on. Watch it. And you mark my words, you're going to see stuff in the news about other countries in South America starting to act about the upcoming emergency that's going on in northern South America. And then meanwhile, we have the thing going on in the Middle East, and then we have Europe that is ready to be set on fire, obviously. And you can see that the people of the individual countries are rethinking this idea of nationalism, and maybe they might revert back to the style of government that they wanted before. And if not, they're going to be handed a bunch more destabilization, which I think you can kind of see in the works for the U.S. too.
Let me wind you back to the sun, the coronal hole stream, and the reason we titled tonight's episode, Why is the Media Getting the Whole World to Look at the Sun? It's going to be the blame and the linchpin, for a better term, for the takedown of the internet and the collapse of the electrical grid system. Will these things be purposeful, or will they be amplified from the sun? This is the kind of thing I wanted to discuss a little bit. But let's step back in history first to get a gauge of why this coronal hole stream story is such a big one here. So I'm going to take you back 5,000 years BC, which is 7,000 years before present. And also about the Chinese myths and legends here. It's called San Zhu Wu, and it's a crow. Now, the Chinese, 7,000 years ago, have this depiction of a black crow walking across the sun, and then their society radically changes. Full collapse. So when you look at this bird on the sun, stylized the way they did, somewhere around 2,500 years ago, some of these Han Dynasty plates that were found, it looks like a coronal hole with actual streamers coming off of it. Those three legs of the crow would actually probably be plasma streamers coming off of the sun that would be visible. So the way I'm looking at it here, this crow, this dark patch, was at least a third of the front of the sun. We, on this earth, possibly could perceive that. They noticed it. They gave it a name. And after this crow marched across the sun, society collapsed. And I said, well, that's really interesting. Why don't I look at the GISP2 ice core data set for the temperature reconstruction of the last 10,000 years? And if you go to 5,000 years BC, or 7,000 years before present, you see a drop-off of 2.5 degrees Celsius on the planet. That would have absolutely wrecked food production. The modern minimum, a drop of 2C, 25% of the world's population perished, and that was in the 1600s. Population migration, the things that upset, the change of the superpowers, the change of the currency, of the superpowers at the time, of what was a world reserve currency, quote unquote, from the Dutch all the way into the English, change and transition of the French. If you follow those, every time there's a change in a global world reserve currency, there is a reset based on solar activity, it looks like. It seems like the global reserve currencies also follow the grand solar minimum. But if you look back in time and you start to see this coronal hole stream and this stylized version of it from the Chinese, represented as a crow. And that's why I said when you saw that, don't tread on me, that coronal hole stream had some very different looking possible, but it wasn't nearly as large. It was probably 30% as big as the one of the crow that the Chinese had referenced wrecking their society. So then I said, all right, well, let me look back here. And what also happens at this time? An actual chapter of history called the Neolithic Decline between 5,000 and 6,000 years before present, starting at, ding, 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 7,000 years before present, or 5,000 BC. The Neolithic Decline, a rapid collapse in populations, 3,000 to 4,000 BC. And what's happening there? And then they start to come back around, 5,400 BC. These settlements kind of rose back up, and then they were abandoned, the population declined, and then suddenly they tried to explain it from communicable diseases. Would that be something to do with galactic cosmic rays that changed DNA or allowed something to sweep through that it weakened the immune system of the entire planet, including plant, animal, and human life from dense cosmic rays? Because you look at these chapters of history matching up. Okay, a full bevy of information about the Neolithic decline overlaying with what the Chinese had seen on the sun is the beginning of that cycle time. So if you actually look at the GISP2 ice core data set, it takes about from, say, 7,000 years to good 300 to 400 years for that drop to complete. So you're talking about wipeout of a 300-year period that just collapsed society. That was referenced as the beginning point again, and then stretched into the 6,000 years ago prior time. So what is this? I mean, how many chapters of history do we have to look at and start to overlay before we start to see something significant is occurring on the sun that occurs again? Catastrophes rock the planet, whether it be comets inbound sending trails of debris across the planet that have bacteria from outer solar system. Is it, Earth impacts? Is it the megaquakes? Because if we had these 7.0 plus earthquakes and a bunch of 6.0s rocking through the Pacific and different parts of the world because of that minimal coronal hole stream that was only 60 Earths big. And the way they try to frame this thing too, and I keep pointing to it, they are pre-priming you. They are programming, pre-planned programming for your mind. They keep pointing us back to the sun. How many, and I'll ask everybody out there, prior to like the year 2020 or 2021, you never really saw that many articles about the sun, solar activity. Now these articles about the solar cycle ending early, 3 years early, 2 years early, whatever early. Now they're pointing you up to the coronal holes. Now they're talking about coronal mass ejections that could wipe out a Carrington event. Like, there is so much information outside the norm that it's piling up in predictive programming right now to get the Earth to continually look at the sun. Now, before, they would not have you look at the sun with a 10-foot pole. Don't look at it, because then you could equate it with the global warming narrative and go, wait a second, sun's driving the climate, bro, not your SUV. But what I find so interesting is, coming into COP28, where now they want to reduce meat consumption, and 13 nations have signed off to instantly cull most of their meat production, and the United States is one of them. So when you look at the reductions in the cattle herds right now, it's not because of disease and not because of this, that, or the other, the feed getting too expensive. It's because the U.S. signed on to reduce its agriculture. And we went through that list of 13 last week. Now, they didn't sign on to completely gut crop production as of yet, but they are signing up for nitrogen reductions in fertilizer inputs into the system. But the lowest hanging fruit is the cattle production. So you're going to start to see places like France, places like Brazil, the United States, they've all signed on to this to instantly cut some like 80% of cattle production out of these countries that have signed up to this due to methane emissions, etc. So here we sit in COP28, and the media across the planet keeps directing us to look at the sun on what a massive effect it has on the earthquakes, what a massive effect it has on possibilities to wreck our electric grid and do such damage to set us back to the Stone Age. But there's still that disconnect between the power of the sun electrically and what it does to storm systems in terms of electrical discharge, like massive lightning fronts, amplification of storms, in terms of convexity and how those thermals will build on themselves, amplifications of hurricanes, cyclones, typhoons, etc., due to that electric connection from the sun to our Earth. When you see massive amplification, that's a direct Earth-Sun connection there along a magnetic field line. That electric is running down there. So you just can't see it in space. Although this last solar storm, this last CME that came by, you could actually see the stylized vision of when you look at Earth's magnetic field, you can see those lines wrapping around the planet. Well, you could actually see that in the sky with the red aurora wrapping down those and just the most massive. They were bending on the most perfect example of a stylized magnetic field line, but you could watch the red rope going up into the atmosphere on that curvature. So now there's all this information coming together that the sun is definitely amplifying, destroying whatever on the planet. But out of the other side of the mouth, they're still trying to feed you that the sun has zero effect on our planet and it's only CO2 driving temperature changes. There's a disconnect here. So I think they're in a shifting mechanism and mode right now. One part of the world is going to take and try to still run with this. It's too much methane emissions, too much nitrogen, it's too much CO2. But the other half of the world is starting to break away. Like we're coming into a split right now. And I don't know what the timing is, why. Obviously, we're going to get more solar activity and solar storms and auroras and different strangeness. But there's still that disconnect of sun driving climate. It does seem like there's a break in the wall. The dam has a couple cracks in it, and I see that one dude with his fingers try to stop the dikes from overwhelming the towns here. I think we're at this rollover juncture. It seems like there's two conflicting messages, and it's confusing people enough to start to ask questions like things aren't adding up on the CO2 side of anything because the entire world's media is pushing everybody to look at the sun in conjunction. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but it's very weird, the messaging going on right now.
Yeah, I actually have seen a lot of articles about the sun. And, like when I do my shows, I don't really cover it. I kind of watch other people's, what they think, where we're at in the line of cycles.
If you want to take a look at the end of the Mycenaean Bronze Age, again, big, huge temperature drops. If you're looking 535 AD, which you reference quite a bit, 1,500 years prior, and you get that massive drop off of a good 1.5 degrees or more Celsius, probably almost 2 degrees in just, 30 years. It just drops off with all the volcanic activity and cooling temperatures. And, everywhere you look, drop off the Minoan warming period, say, 3,500 years ago before present, and it just drops straight off a cliff, 3 degrees Celsius. And then, you get that massive drop off 8,000 years ago where that was about the biggest drop off in temperatures outside the Younger Dryas era. And whoever had reformed society that had lived through the cataclysm 12,000 years prior, they got the knees knocked out. 8,300 years or so prior to now, it just drops straight off. 2.5 to almost 3 degrees Celsius. That's an agricultural destroyer right there. So,
that picture you sent me with the crow on it. Now, I don't know how they were looking at the sun like this. Obviously, that's what somebody's going to say. Well, they couldn't have saw this from the Earth. Yet,
they were using mica schists.
They were looking at the sun with some really thick obsidian, like the Mayans were doing. They were just looking at it. I mean, I have several pieces. We just looked at the last eclipse with it. The whole family had a little one to look through, and the best ones were really the thickest ones because it cut out all the glare, and you could actually look at the sun as a ball up there in space without, the super bright stuff on it. Plus, if someone did see this on the sun, and for whatever reason they periodically looked at the sun, like in some kind of primitive science to keep track of stuff, or maybe it's just one guy and they look up and then all of a sudden the eye of Sauron's looking back at you from space, because that's what that looks like. This one that was on my birthday, ironically, there a couple of days ago on the 30th. And if you look at it, it looks like a, kind of a reptilian pupil, the classic reptilian eye that everyone talks about. Or from someone else's point of view, it could totally look like this crow-looking thing on the sun. And obviously, it wouldn't have been the same spot. Matter of fact, this one right here, you could say it kind of looks like a seal in a way if you're just looking at the black spot. But how terrifying would that be if you keep track of the sun and you barely ever see these little sunspots on it go by because of the contrast? But then you see this one that's big enough to notice like this. So if you were looking at the sun, it was pretty bizarre, I guess, if you had the right way to look at it.
Yeah, and I'm really thinking those three legs are a stylized version of actually plasma filaments jumping off of the sun. That would have been very noticeable. Now, the color of the plasma filaments that would have been tendriling off the sun, that's an unknown. Imagine if you could actually see tendrils whipping around off the sun up there because they maybe came off the limbs of the sun so large and so outstretched they might have been, trying to reach out to Mercury because that thing's basically a metal planet. So imagine if the tendrils of electricity were trying to rip off of that and reach out to Mercury, and you could see those things jumping around like one of those plasma globes where the strobes and the filaments would be actually outside into the black space where you could see them moving around, which would be something to behold too, because you have to try to realize they're trying to reference something that they saw in a third dimensionality and movement into a single image on a flat surface. So how would you do that?
If there was a relative easy way to know when bad times were coming, that you might use that information against people, or, kind of like put options in more recent terms, like all of the people that invested in put options, say like on 9/10, and then all of a sudden on 9/11, they got super amounts of money. This is kind of like that. If you have real records of long past human eras, and you have the most brilliant minds working, I'm going to assume that, because why wouldn't you if you had the world's resources at your fingertips? You would have the smartest people that aren't really known working, or even the ones that are known, working behind the scenes to give you an accurate depiction of the cycles, how they overlap, what happens afterwards, beforehand, and then you would do your betting, like put options. I know that this particular solar cycle is going to create an extra amount of volcanic activity, possibly tsunamis, and you could bet on things in the future after that if you knew that that was a reasonable thing. And the whole idea that right now we're getting very close, even in the public, to predicting earthquakes. So if you shared this kind of information on a mass scale and the mass amounts of people understood the importance of it as far as humankind goes, there would be a lot more people paying attention. And then you would have the common folk getting good at the cycles and predicting things. And I think that's literally what's happening right now. And so they've wedged their bets against that. The public or the masses are not going to figure out the same things fast enough. And therefore, they'll be, after the fact, crying about it or have loss or live in a completely different world. But they will have already gambled on all of these different scenarios. And I think that's what the people don't understand. If the powers that be really want to pull the plug on it, they're smart enough to know how to do it in stages and steps so that they don't get stopped in their plans. And if they have the best resources of knowing things, like I would agree that probably the Air Force and the Russian whatever space agency and people over there would know if an object was about to hit. Now, whether or not they would share it before someone in the public also discovered it, but it's less likely because obviously you need millions and sometimes billions of dollars to create the instruments to actually look out there. But we know that they have them. And I think that's why sometimes they delay information until they get a chance to look at it and make sure it's a nothing burger before they go ahead and release it. Because if you notice, a lot of people watch the sun and then there are days that weird things happen and that there's a delay in the intel on it. I think that they know what's going on, and it does seem like there's an uptick in the connection between Earth and the sun as far as creating natural disasters in a phase on Earth. And what you were talking about right there about the temperature. Now, imagine if that big spot that we were looking at there becomes a common occurrence. In other words, the sun is shutting down as far as overall light output, which you would have a bunch of these sunspots all over it, a dimmer sun. That would dramatically and almost instantaneously, as far as a year goes by, change the entire way the whole Earth works. And talk about driving climate change. That would totally change the climate in probably just 1 year if the solar output stopped, anywhere close to what it's been doing for thousands of years. Like, say it really reduced like 30% or just 10% of the light. There would be massive famines and complete environmental change in decades, and you wouldn't even recognize the old world. So what a perfect time, if you knew something like that might happen, to plan around that with your continuity of government and set the world ablaze, gather the actual resources, or at least the control of the resources, and then let everybody stay distracted with false media, entertainment, and strife. Strife is one of the biggest distractions on this planet right now when it comes to hijacking human beings' time so that they can't create or produce anything positive. All around the world, people are going through hardcore strife. People are hungry, they're running, they're scared about what their governments are about to do, and they're just caught in the middle of it. And we have an opportunity in the Western world to see that that's what they're doing to us and put a stop to it.
And this podcast has been brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet. If you support this kind of content, please visit My Patriot Supply and TrueLeafMarket.com. I appreciate you spending your time with us, and I'll see you next interview.